Yeah. I spit raps like a heart attack, fast fatal heart impacts, past painful scars. In fact, I blast tasteful bars and packs. I back up my actions, fact don't ask, grab reactions, jacked attack with every word, then act with class as they hear me snap. I got nothing to lose, cause I fought and felt the bruise. Now I'm not the one confused, call the shots and they produce. I ain't lost, I'm finally loose, pick a new silver excuse. I need the views to boost me to a new abuse of being used. Everybody wants a piece now, y'all can rest in peace now. You're dead to me, so peace out. Remember, you're just freaked out. Get ready for defeat now, I'm gonna make you bleed out. Listen on repeat now and weed out all the weak now. Get up and make a change, don't remember yesterday. If you got something to say, speak your mind before your grave. Cause your life is yours to save, ain't nobody gonna change. Everybody stays the same, so be different, make a name.
Hello and welcome into the University Podcast. My name is Kyle. You can find me on Twitter at KL_fantasy. And joining me today is one of the OGs of the Undroppables, one of the greatest dynasty managers I've seen work in my leagues, and the host of the Undrafted Podcast, the one and only Jax Falcone. How are you doing today?
What's up, man? Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it goes by many names. You know, Jax Falcone, Dino Game Theory. I've heard Mr. Game Theory before.
That's when I refer to myself.
Scott Belanger.
That's when I refer to myself in the third person. I call myself Mr. Game Theory. Yeah.
Oh, love it. Love it. Anyway, we've got some running backs to talk about. I mean, Jax Falcone always brings the anatomy of the top 16, formerly top 12 running back. This stuff is like a great baseline for evaluating running backs. So kind of talk me through how you came to these conclusions.
Yeah, it's a good question. There was when I started to get into dynasty and fantasy football analysis, I would find that there was two camps oftentimes. One was super nerdy analytics, and then super anti-nerdy analytics. And I felt like the super nerdy analytics were speaking a different language than the sort of the masses, the rest of us, you know? And while I understood some of the super nerdy analytics and it made sense to me, I also understood that it probably didn't make sense to a lot of other people. And so I said, well, I get it, but I don't think it necessarily translates into human English. So I was like, let's see if I can digest what they're trying to say into a real easy to understand way. And I guess I succeeded in that because people really love the anatomy series for that reason, but that was the goal. It was to take just a little bit of what people are saying are predictive analytics and to show you how and why that's the case. And I felt like what the utility of the anatomy series is identification of what an elite prospect looked like when they were a prospect, and now that they're a successful or high value dynasty asset, what did they look like when they were a prospect? Take the group of them that we did top 12, top 16. I move it around a little bit, honestly, just because I feel like it. Just because if I see like J.K. Dobbins is at 14, it's like, well, to me, that's an elite prospect. I'm going to move him in there, So I usually look at somewhere in that top 10 to 15-ish of all the positions. With tight end, I try to keep it to a small group, top 8. You don't want to have the top 20 tight ends because you're taking in players that aren't elite, clearly. So, with the tight ends, it's a smaller sample size and the data is not as useful maybe. But it still helps you understand and identify, what an elite prospect, what an elite player looks like when they were a prospect, so that when you look at a prospect, you can say, well, this guy looks nothing like that. So therefore, maybe I'm barking up the wrong tree. A lot of times we fall in love with whether it be tape or something about a player, and we're like, dude, this guy's the next, right? Whatever. And then we look and we're like, wait, he checks literally 0 boxes. Or, maybe he checks a few boxes, but this one's a huge red flag for me. Why didn't he do X, Y, or Z? And so it's a real simple way for folks like you and I who are not Rhodes Scholars to utilize analytics to our advantage.
Hey, speak for yourself. I did really well on my ACT. Thank you very much. But yeah, we can just go ahead and kind of go through this year's anatomy of a running back. Came out, 2-3 weeks ago, so pretty fresh on the
Yep.
mind. Obviously, you did go to 16 this season, so that list includes Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift, Najee Harris, Javonte Williams, Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler, Joe Mixon, J.K. Dobbins, Antonio Gibson, Dalvin Cook, Saquon Barkley, Nick Chubb, Derrick Henry, Cam Akers, Travis Etienne, and Alvin Kamara. Obviously, all those guys have had great success so far in their careers. I would say all of them, except for maybe two, were considered amazing prospects when they came out. So,
Yeah.
definitely a strong list this year, even with 16 guys. And so the first thing you mentioned here is draft pedigree. Obviously, we haven't gotten there yet with 2022, but this one speaks for itself. I mean, you have 4 guys drafted round 1, 9 guys drafted round 2, 2 drafted round 3, and then 1 in round 4 or later.
And that was Austin Eckler.
Yeah. Austin Eckler, who went undrafted completely. So,
yep.
Is there hope for these guys who come in after round 3 or what?
No, there is not. There isn't. There isn't hope. I mean, really, even, guys like Elijah Mitchell and whatnot, James Robinson, obviously they can get there. So, you do want to keep your eye on them, but it's very, very hard for them to maintain. I love Elijah Mitchell. Everybody knows that. I'm documented, as being a huge Elijah Mitchell fan. But, hey, it's hard for them to maintain their spot in the pecking order in the NFL. And if they do, you look, Aaron Jones was on that list for a little bit. He's fallen off, right? Now, what I used for my top 16 was not performance-based. It was value-based. I suppose you could, do this exercise a million different ways. You could just look at, and I thought about doing it a number of different ways and probably will in the future. I'll get a little help from Blake, maybe put some stuff together. But ultimately, like, you could look at, hey, who are the guys that have finished in the top 12 or 24 twice in the last 3 years or something? You could do all this sort of thing. I get that. I just want to look at it as a value base, because even if a guy does well, but he's not a top 15 running back in Dynasty, then okay, well, then that's fairly replaceable. So we want to see which are the guys that actually hold value in Dynasty. And it's either uber performers like Austin Eckler, or guys that were drafted early, and so it doesn't mean that they can't break through if you're not drafted there. It just means, like, if you're picking guys who are 5th round, 4th round, 6th round picks, and you're like, this is the guy, just be wary, right? So, make sure that every other box is filled when you do that, right? You don't want to pick a guy who's a 5th round pick who also misses every other metric on here and say, yeah, he's going to be the next great thing, because you're probably wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously not a high value proposition, but we've definitely seen guys come out of those later rounds or undrafted and put up 1 or 2 good seasons. But like you said, that value for them is hard to maintain. Guys like James White or like a Danny Woodhead or now Cordero Patterson. I mean,
right.
These guys come out of nowhere and can perform really well, but that value just doesn't stay the same near as well as the guys who were drafted earlier, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and we look at the other thing, a part of that draft capital is early declare. Well, 11 were early declares, 5 were not. And I mentioned in the anatomy this year that Najee and Etienne fall under the not early declares, and they for all intents and purposes could have and should have come out their junior year. They certainly could have. That's for sure, because we had them in the elite of the elite in that draft class, which would have been amazing had they come out, because that would have been, the Akers, Swift, that whole thing. With, imagine if Najee and Etienne were in there too, and they should have been. Part of the reason why I had sort of targeted that 2020 class for so long, because it was just like, oh my god, Najee, Etienne, right, Swift, Akers, Dobbins, JT. Oh my gosh, I'm getting excited already. But right, so that was that class, and maybe that's why they didn't come out, because it was so stacked. Who knows, right?
It's a business decision.
Yeah, exactly. But and Najee made himself some money, no doubt, because he wasn't going to be a top 20 pick or anything like that the year before, clearly. But so I think he probably did himself some favors there. In any event, so 5 non-early declares But really, you could start to say, hey, if the guy had some early declare in him the year before, like Najee and Etienne. So yeah, you're looking for an early declare who's drafted in the first 2 rounds, but certainly by day 2, right? Second or third round.
Yeah. And Nick Chubb was injured, so he spent 1 more season. So really
Bingo.
just like 2 guys who
yes
weren't considered.
And again, it's Eckler, right? The outlier, and maybe I forget who the other one was. Actually, I'd have to go back and look. Regardless, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
Maybe it was Gibson. Maybe, I don't know.
That would make sense.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. The point of the matter, right? Exactly. It doesn't really matter. These guys tend to come out early. Javonte came out early because he knew he was dope. And yeah, so you're usually looking for an early declare. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't be a good running back and not fit these things. It just generally means if you're going to be the best of the best, a top 10, dynasty running back asset, you're going to need to hit those marks.
Yeah, for sure. And the one thing we saw last week finally was the NFL Combine. We finally got some weights and some heights and all these fun things that we love to see in prospects. So size and speed is the next group in this anatomy series. Obviously for weight, what are we kind of looking at?
Yeah, for me though, weight is important, but I think BMI is even the bigger story to tell. Generally, you're looking for 200 pounds plus, but even in that, you really are looking for that close to or at 30 BMI or greater, and that just means that the guys have to have a little bit of girth, which makes total sense. They're running backs. They literally run into the line against, NFL linebackers. Like, what are you, crazy? They can't be slight of frame. Otherwise, they're not going to hold up. And also, if they're slight of frame, maybe you and I would play them, but the NFL is going to see their utility as something other than a 3-down workhorse back. They're going to be a part-time back. They're going to be a change of pace back. So that's the other thing. It's like you might say, well, I don't think it matters. Well, the NFL does, so you're wrong. You know what I mean? Whether you and I think that a guy should be good, even though he doesn't have the weight or whatever, it literally does not matter because they're not going to be utilized in the way that we need them to be utilized. You can certainly find some value in some lighter backs, the Kenny Gainwells and whatnot. But even Kenny Gainwell, who I love coming in, was shown to be sort of pigeonholed as a 3rd down back, as a change of pace back in the NFL. And yes, there's some value to that, but we're not looking at Kenny Gainwell as the next, Nick Chubb or, CMC. It's very unlikely. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And I mean, luckily with this class, we didn't see, too many players at the Combine get completely ruled out with, the weight BMI stuff.
Right.
Obviously Breece Hall came in at 217. Rashad White 214, which was great considering he was listed at like 200 on the website for Arizona State. Kenny Walker 211, pretty solid. I mean, the only guy that there's really complaints about here is, of course, Kyren Williams.
Yes.
A guy that I've been gushing about on the podcast for 2 weeks now, and he comes in, measures in at 194, and then also runs the worst 40 time at the Combine, just ruining his own draft stock. So
Kyren Williams is basically a cross-off at this point. And it's bad. It's really bad. He misses so many of the metrics, it's not even funny. So first of all, he misses the BMI. He's under 29, not just close to 30, he's under 29. He's not 200 pounds. He's slow. He has a terrible speed score, terrible burst score. His college yards per carry under 5. I mean, you start making a list, he misses almost every single metric. He's an early declare, but he's not going to have draft capital. So to me, I'm completely off Kyren Williams unless he's a 4th round rookie pick or something like that. It's just not worth it.
He had a 8th percentile speed score.
Yeah, it's awful. Yeah, a guy like that has to have something, right? Like, yes, he's got skill. I mean, clearly that's why we love the film. Like, he's an awesome football player, but so wasn't Eric Crouch or whatever. He won the Heisman. Like, there's just certain utilities that don't fly in the NFL, and a small, slow back is not going to be what gets you to the next level, and it's just not going to work. So I'm out.
I mean, luckily he is a guy with 77 catches in the past 2 seasons. So
yeah,
like you said, 4th round pick. there might be something worth there.
Yeah, I had Matt Kelly on the show today, and we talked about it. And I said, the problem with that is that, if he's a fourth round rookie pick, he won't be, because the ADP, he's still going to be tethered to his pre-combine ADP. And yes, it's going to fall, but it's not going to fall far enough for me to get excited, right? He's going to still be taken at like the 302. You're going to be like, wait, someone just take him over Trey McBride? No, fuck that. You know what I mean? Like, so, there's just going to be other opportunities in and around where I think he's going to be drafted. But we'll see. I mean, the NFL draft capital will also matter. Look, if somehow, some way he gets, the CEH treatment and somehow gets a, second round pick from a team, it's like, well, I guess we have to reconsider his value at some point. But again, I think when that happens, his ADP will be higher than I'm willing to spend on him. So I think that the ADP versus where I'll value him based off of this data will just be out of alignment. And that's why I'm out. Not because I'm totally out on every player, but I just think, I don't hate players that hate ADPs. Hail to the king. But that's what it comes down to. I don't know how you feel about it, Kyle.
I mean, I'm not worried about him going in the second round. I think it's more likely that he goes undrafted than going in the second round now.
I agree.
And I think if he goes undrafted, his ADP will plummet enough for me to be slightly interested, just because I really like the tape. And
yeah, the tape is good, man.
and I mean, sometimes you just got to follow your gut.
Yeah.
Sometimes when it's cheap to follow your gut, you can follow your gut.
Yes. If you want to, you go right ahead. I'll probably pass and take Kevin Harris.
Yeah,
I'm just messing with you.
Yeah, for sure.
But at least Kevin Harris has like what I'm talking about. Early declare, 5'10", 221, great burst. We'll see what he runs at his pro day. He did catch some passes in his best season in college. He did have 6 yards per carry. Like, he at least hit some of these metrics where it's like, well, it's possible. He's probably not going to get the draft capital, and he's probably going to be more of a James Robinson, Elijah Mitchell comp than an elite comp. But I'd still rather have a James Robinson player than a whatever the hell Kyron Williams is. I mean, I just don't know the comp that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, I watched Kevin Harris, this week. So I don't know. My comp is more like Jarrett Patterson, maybe, but I'm less appealed.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit, you and I, pre-show, and it's like this running back class for me, and maybe we'll get there, but it's like there's a couple at the top, and then it's kind of just like, I don't know, it's a lot of the same for me. There's nothing that sticks out as like, I got to get this guy, and I hope the NFL drafts this guy high. It's like, let's just see what the NFL thinks, and I'll go from there, because there's not too much I'm excited about after the top few.
Yeah, I mean, in that tier that you mentioned, there's a bunch of guys like Kevin Harris, Kevin Harris, Zamir White, Brian Robinson, all guys who are big and tested well and have decent production. So
yeah, let's see which one goes where, and we'll figure it out from there. Like, I'm not too excited. Got to remember, one of the reasons that the data is what it is like, why does first and second round, day one, day two draft capital matter more than other positions? It's because opportunity is more important than talent at the running back position. We can say that James Robinson is so good, but if he doesn't get the chance to run, none of that matters. So opportunity more important. At the wide receiver position, talent is more important than opportunity, because the quarterback's going to throw it to the open guy, right? And so you have to get open. So you have to be good to get open. You have to be good to earn a target. Whereas at the running back, you just have to be in the game. And if they call a run, you're getting it. So at that point, there you go. You got another carry. And, so that's where it comes from. So you can be not as good as even your backup, but if you're in the game, you're going to outperform them, obviously.
Absolutely. Moving on in the anatomy of a running back here, we have speed. Obviously, 40 time is the big one for speed. Sub 4.4, we got 4 guys. 4.4 to 4.5, we have 7 guys. And 4.5 to 4.6, 4 guys. And then 1 guy over 4.6, and it's Javonte Williams, who was at a pro day, and I believe you said you have added 5 seconds to his because it was a pro day.
Yeah, exactly. It is an adjusted time. So if you don't use his adjusted time, you just use the raw pro day number, then it is under a 4.6. I mean, basically, you are looking for under a 4.6. And I know that this also goes hand in hand with speed score. And if you look at it when you correlate it with speed score, meaning size and speed together, merging those two things into one metric, that's when you really see it, because just about all of them are above the 50th percentile of a speed score, which is hard to quantify. But basically, the spot I grabbed this from is from playerprofiler.com. I just had Matt Kelly on my show. I mentioned he's got a great website, obviously, and I utilize it a lot. When you go to the player pages on Player Profiler, it will show you their speed score and the percentile that it is for that position. So if a guy is a running back and his speed score is 100, you'll know that that's like a 65th percentile or whatever. It shows you that. So ultimately, you want to be an above average speed score, and it looks like almost all of them are. So once you have an above average speed score, you're basically qualified to be an elite running back in the league. So the bigger you are, the slower you can be, but the smaller you are, you better be able to cook.
Yeah. So after testing at the combine, we have 8 running backs who ended up below a 96. Those are Jalen Warren, Zonovan Knight, Kennedy Brooks, Letty Brown, Sincere McCormick, Jerrion Ely, Ronnie Rivers, and obviously Kyron Williams.
Yeah. Pour one out, like I said.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
who are some of the guys that highlight for that? Because I haven't actually done that yet. Who are some of the ones that you like the most with their speed score, if you have it in front of you?
yeah, I mean, Isaiah Pacheco obviously led all running backs in 40 time, also led all running backs in speed score as he weighed 216. He came in at 118.5 on speed score. And then we have Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker, and Zamir White as the next 3. So
there you go. And so when you look at those 4, Pacheco, who knows? We'll see. Maybe he's the sleeper right now. I mean, he's certainly a sleeper.
He's definitely fast.
But he's definitely fast too, right? But you look at those 3. I was actually surprised by Zamir White. I'm ready to eat a little bit of crow on Zamir White. I thought he was going to be more in the 4.6 range and kind of just a 2 down back and not exactly explosive. I'm definitely going to go back and watch the tape on Zamir White and try and get an understanding of, how he wins. And I want to get an understanding of why the hell he didn't break a lot of big runs, because with that speed, you'd think he'd be able to break free a little bit. So I'll watch that and see if I can change my tune on Zamir White a little bit. A lot of people were talking about his injury and him sort of being a couple years away from the injury. I like that answer, because I remember I was so in on Zamir White as a freshman, right? Yeah, I know you do this is the university pod. I'm not a Devy player or anything, but I do keep an eye out for incoming freshmen, so I know when they're, right? So I can value the classes going forward, like I did with the 2020 class. Zamir White was one of those guys. He was like, all right, here he is. And he fell off for me a little bit, and I wasn't so sure. I thought he was maybe a little bit more of a 2-down utility player at the NFL level. But at this speed, if he can catch the football, he could be the sleeper that could be the sneaky elite running back in this class. What do you think of that?
I mean, I had the same reaction as you after I watched the combine was, let's go watch that tape. And I did it, and I was pretty impressed. I mean, he was a guy who definitely looked better at the end of the season, which, goes right in line with what everyone was saying about the injuries. So I agree with that myself. The hands weren't necessarily great. Noah Hills tweeted out a true catch rate for all the rookie running backs, basically only using catch rate on targets that were catchable. And Zamir White was at pretty low on this list, 81% true catch rate, 4th lowest in the class. His hands were an issue I had on tape, so I think the stats obviously agree with me there. So not terribly excited about him being a 3rd down guy, but he runs really fast and he's very explosive. So 1st and 2nd down, maybe we'll see it.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely doesn't hit any of the elite profile stuff that we're going to talk about. He is coming out as a junior. He might get draft capital. He does have size and speed. that might be enough, but not enough to overspend when he, as we start to get into some of the next anatomy measurables, he falls short. Which is why it's a little bit of a questionable class. You kind of have to tell the story that he was hurt. One of the anatomies you're going to get to is yards per carry. Yards per carry is not one of these things that you should look at and be like, this guy's better than this guy because. I don't see it that way. But I do see good players making big plays, right? And so if good players make big plays, they're bound to have a little bit of a higher yards per carry, especially over the long haul. You'll see, seasons where one guy's at like 6.5, then 4.9. Like, yeah, you're going to see variations and stuff like that. But over the long haul, better players have better performances. And he just was always at 5.2 to 5.4, which is fine. It's just not elite. And then the other thing is he never had more than 10 catches in a season. Now, someone can say, well, they don't use him that way. They had James Cook and yet. Look, I get it. There's always a story to tell. There's always an excuse to make. But at the end of the day, Georgia didn't see him as a good pass catcher. Otherwise, they would have used him as that. I think it's as simple as that. So, he has a few holes in terms of explosive run rate and his reception total in any single season and as a career.
Yeah, he was a whole percentage lower. 31st percentile in 10-yard run rate, 33rd percentile in breakaway run rate, being converting 10-yard gains to 20-yard gains.
Yes.
Word soup there, but
but you're right. That's the analysis, right? And I'm curious if you have all that in front of you. I love that. I love that data. I don't have mine in front of me. That 10-yard run rate is big. And Noah Hills, we love Noah Hills here on this on my podcast and at the Undroppables. He's certainly someone that I think is doing great work. He was talking about the 10-yard to 20-yard, which is really a cool metric, because it shows how often you take a 10-yard run into more, which means how often are you beating second-level defenders? And how often is Zamir White turning a 10-yard into 20-yard? You were saying he's in the
26.5% of the time, which is a 33rd percentile rank.
There you go. And I think Tyler Algier has that problem too, if I'm not mistaken. Another guy that I really like for a lot of reasons: size, speed score, burst, power, catching ability. But I think he also has a low, 10 to 20 run rate. Is that correct? Because I think Rachaad White, is sort of the opposite of that. He's got some breakaway stuff, but he's also has a harder time navigating closer to the line of scrimmage, which all makes sense. You had Tommy on the show last week, and he was talking about how he really liked Rachaad White, as an early down one cut player, which I think is exactly the way I see Rachaad White as well. I think Rachaad White is a little bit scheme dependent. I mean, I know everybody would basically, quote unquote, do good in that San Francisco offense. We always, talk about that. But I do think look, Trey Sermon didn't. It's not like, I didn't think Trey Sermon was a great fit for that offense either. I did think Elijah Mitchell was. I do think that, Rachaad White, I said, reminded me a little bit of Raheem Mostert, that upright style, that one cut and go, that explosion and speed. Look, he's not as fast as Raheem Mostert, but he's pretty freaking fast. And he does have that sort of slick pass catching and, that quick takeoff and that one cut ability. So I think when you see Rachaad White, he's able to break off a bit more, and Tyler Algier's utility is a little bit more of a slammer.
So what you're saying is put Rachaad White in Miami.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah,
for sure.
Yes, I like that a lot.
Pull up Algier's numbers. Actually, pretty solid. From 10 to 20 yards, it was 35.71%, which was a 74th percentile mark.
Pretty good.
Good in both 2020 and 2021, although he didn't get to 10 yards very much in 2021. 11th percentile at getting 10-yard gains in 2021, 92nd percentile in 2020.
Wow.
the Zach Wilson effect, I guess.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, for sure, man. Yep,
I
for
mean,
sure.
yeah. I mean, when the defense actually respects the passing game, there's definitely more room to run, considering Jaren Hall, not a great passer, more of a runner. So
That's a great point, man.
yeah. Back to speed score. Just real quick, the other three guys who were in a pretty good tier were Devontae Price, Pierre Strong, and Treston Ebner. All guys who look pretty athletic on tape. A lot of people expected them to do well at the combine. I saw some people saying Ebner was going to run the fastest 40. Obviously not quite, but those are your other three guys who tested well in the speed score, who tested really well in the speed scores category.
Yeah, I've said it before. You know, I used to have these arguments on Twitter about speed, and I would say things like, you know, the best running backs are fast, and people would say, just because you're fast doesn't mean you're good. I said, oh, I never said that. Yeah, I never said that if you're fast, you're a good running back. I said if you're a dope elite running back, you're probably also fast. So what happens is people conflate that and think, oh, because I'm fast, I'm good. Or because the player is fast, he's going to be good. No, he might not be good at all. He might just be a fast dude. But if you're a great running back and you're fast, you have the chance to be an elite running back, if that makes any sense. So some of these guys might just be nobodies. You know, I never heard of a couple of them. You're going to have to tell me if they're any good. You know, that's what I got you here for, Kyle. It's true. You tell me, you're like, no, this guy's dog shit. Don't worry about it. All right, good. Cross him up.
Pierre Strong. I mean, he was really good as
Pierre
an
Strong.
FBS running back.
Yeah, I like Pierre Strong.
Treston Ebner, a hell of an athlete, at least. A lot of people like Devontae Price at the Senior Bowl, so
Yeah,
I haven't to his tape yet, but somebody I want to watch for sure.
Yep, I'm with you.
And then the next up is the big one, the one that gets a lot of fight from some people. That's college receptions, and you used their best season total.
Yes.
And usually the number you pull is the cutoff is 20. I like that this year you had 2 under 20 and then nobody between 20 and 25.
Yeah.
So everyone else was over 25 receptions in a single season. Who are the outliers here, and why is this so important?
Yeah, it's super important. But think about it. Who are the 2 outliers, Kyle, right? Derrick Henry and Nick Chubb. Literally, with the 2 monsters. You know, Nick Chubb, probably one of the best, probably the best pure running back in the NFL. And I don't even think that's a hot take. I think that's almost like a given. Like, he is an absolute monster on the ground. And Derrick Henry, some of the most legendary seasons ever. And he needed that just to become a top 5 fantasy running back. I mean, catching passes is the pathway. Nick Chubb has sort of underperformed, even though he's been awesome. Like, he hasn't been an elite top 6 running back in PPR because of the fact he doesn't catch passes. So they didn't catch passes at the college level. Yet I was told coming in, oh, no. They just didn't use them that way. They're going to catch passes. Okay. And then guess what? They don't catch passes at the NFL level. Now, they are so dope. They are so badass that they were able to overcome that. But that's how good you have to be. So if I've got a guy, Zamir White, that's where I'm starting to get concerned of him being an elite level prospect going into the NFL. When is he Nick Chubb or Derrick Henry? I don't think so. So therefore, I'm a little bit skeptical. The guy that falls into this bucket and we have the conversations about, of course, is Kenneth Walker. And that's why I kept asking so many of the guys on my pod all year so far this year was, how close is Kenneth Walker to a guy like Nick Chubb as a runner? Because if he's Nick Chubb, great. If he's not close to Nick Chubb, well, then maybe we have an issue there too. Now, we had film watcher du jour, our guy, Tommy Moe on your pod last week, saying that Kenneth Walker can catch passes. We saw it at the combine that he looks like he can catch passes. That's great.
Tommy right? Texted me when he looked like he could catch passes.
Right? But that's all great. But until it actually happens, it hasn't happened. And so I really like Kenneth Walker. He's one of my favorite players to watch. I love him. he played in that Wake Forest offense. I think you can tell me a little bit about that, but I think it was like archaic is like a nice way of putting it. I don't
I would
know.
call it archaic because it's not something that a lot of old teams did or anything. It's
Yeah.
just, um, I mean, it's basically RPO, but like the mesh point on the RPO is
Like
like
3
5 seconds.
seconds. Yeah, right. Right.
One. Um,
Yeah.
so it's not like anything that's like been done in the past. So it's not. I wouldn't technically call it archaic, but it is.
Archaic's the wrong thing to say.
And
Yeah.
because of that long mesh point, the running back doesn't really go out in routes at all.
He can't. Right.
You
Yeah.
can't.
Exactly. Yeah.
So um, Kenneth Walker in his 2 seasons at Wake Forest had 3 receptions each season.
Yeah.
I believe when I looked back at it, their total running back receptions in either year was like 10. So nobody's getting to 20 in the Wake Forest offense.
Right. Right. Yeah. It wasn't like they preferred someone else over him specifically. It was that,
Yeah,
they
the
just
other guy
don't do
had
that.
like 6. So
Yeah.
What-
And then what about at Michigan State? I think Michigan State also a little bit shy to target the running backs out of the backfield. And he's still, what do you have, like 15 or 17? I mean, not
13.
good, but 13, yeah, not good, but more.
Yeah. Michigan State more so archaic.
Yeah.
Very
Yes.
very vanilla, run it up your gut offense. And then their quarterback has some legs, so that never really helps, running back dump offs when your quarterback's going to run it himself. So I mean,
Yeah.
there are definitely things to say about the film, but I mean, he did get outproduced in terms of receptions at both teams, even if it's in a low total number. So
Yeah. And as we go through this, of course, that's why we say there is only one elite running back prospect. And that's why running backs are easy. And it is Brees Hall. It's because he hit, like, I wasn't sure. I knew he had this college receptions thing. The size I was actually worried about because he's a little bit taller. He's actually, I think Brees is a little bit under the, nope, he's right
no,
at 30. Right at
5'11",
30.
217, 30.3
Yeah, he's
BMI.
perfect. He's perfect. I mean, Brees Hall is elite now. I mean, I wasn't sure that he was as athletic. I'd heard that he wasn't going to run as fast. People were comparing him to David Montgomery and saying, is he better than? And I was like, I don't know. I'm not a huge college football fan, but no. Let me tell you, based off of what I've seen from Brees Hall, he's now moves himself up a level for sure. And he has to be in the conversation for the 1.01, even in the Superflex League. That's where he's at. He's pushed himself very, very close to that elite level. He's now in with the Dobbins, Akers, Swift, and close to the Dalvin, CMC, JT, Saquon. He's right in there. He's in there. So he is an absolute auto select at the 1.01 in a non-super flex and has to be considered even with that pick in a super flex. That's where Brees Hall is, because he literally checks every single box of the anatomy series. And that's exciting. That means you have a high upside running back prospect immediately.
Write that down, guys. That's 2 guests in a row saying, Brees Hall almost in that JT tier. So, yeah. And I think that David Montgomery comp you mentioned they both went to Iowa State. So.
I know, exactly. Well, that's why they did that. But I was like, I don't know, man. Isn't he better than I don't know. I'm not a huge college football fan. And the only one where he falls a little bit short is the yards per carry, but whatever, that's not a huge one. That's just one of those when, that box is checked, you're like, oh boy, here we go. This is a guy. Look, if they check them all and that one, you're like, oh dear, this is a guy, because all the great ones have done that for the most part. It's actually, is that coming up here? Is that I think that's down the line a little bit, but like, it's crazy. Very, very few guys average less than 6 yards per carry. It's just kind of crazy, So, it's just kind of a weird one to care about, but I look at it as sort of a signal of talent. If you're close enough, I mean, I guess it's okay. Like I said, it's not something that I would ever discount a guy. Akers was famous for that. I loved Cam Akers, and I thought people were sleeping on Cam Akers because he had the 4.8 or whatever it was. But, we knew that Florida State team, literally he was contacted behind the line of scrimmage on average, right? Remember that? Like, he started with a negative number blocked for him that season. It was like incredible. So everything that he got was created on his own. It was nothing blocked for him at all that year.
Absolutely. And Brees Hall still at 5.8 yards per carry throughout his career. So not bad for sure. Definitely very close to 6.
That's basically a top 70th percentile or something like that. Like, so it's still really good, so it's not a concerning number. It's just off of elite. So really it's probably somewhere in the 5.5 to 6 is fine, in terms of being above average. And again, because there's so much else that comes into play, like you point out, scheme, opponent, etc. It's not something that you want to over analyze.
Yeah, and those scheme concerns are why I like yards per carry plus.
Yes.
Obviously, that's just concerning, like your yards per carry versus your teammates' yards per carry, how those two compare. I mean, Hall was always better than his teammates and consistently improved on his yards per carry plus. In 2021, it was 1.11 extra yard, which is a 75th percentile number, and his career mark ended at 0.65 yards per carry more, which is a 55th percentile number. So better than his teammates. I mean, those numbers aren't, jumping off the page, but they're not disqualifying you by any means either. So
that's right. Yeah, it's not the Isaiah Spiller corollary.
Yep, absolutely not. So moving on, we have early college dominance being the next one. Best seasons as a freshman or sophomore, only 2 players had less than 1,000 total yards. Is that total yards or rushing yards?
I think it's total. I'm looking at
total yards.
Yeah, so total yards.
Yeah, so only 2 players under 1,000. Kamara was one of them. He had 989, and his coaching staff sucked.
Yeah, Tennessee fan. But yeah, you're right. It's like, you just look for early college performance. Like, ultimately, if you're dope, you're probably going to be good in college. I mean, it's like, I know it's so simple, but like, so look for it, and so it's a signal of a talented player. There's Ramondre Stevensons and Rashad Whites who come out of nowhere, JUCO transfer. Yes, but that's a red flag. That's all it is. I mean, it doesn't mean they're not good. It doesn't mean that at all. It just means that we don't know. But when there's guys who were not productive early in their careers, you better have a damn good story to tell. Like Najee. Najee was like, okay, he's behind Damian Harris. He's at Alabama, yada, yada. Okay. That's fine. But, if a guy's playing at some, rinky-dink school and he didn't do shit until his senior year and then dominates, probably out. Don't sing me a song about how he was good the whole time. He probably wasn't. So, we see that out of these guys. As a matter of fact, pretty crazy. 9 out of them had 1,500 or more total yards before their, by their sophomore season, either their freshman or their sophomore season. So, yeah, usually very early on. A lot of these guys had it their freshman year. It's like right off the bat, they're great.
Yeah, Brees Hall had 1,700 in his sophomore year.
Bingo.
Isaiah Spiller only had 1,200 in his sophomore year. Kenneth Walker, not there. I mean, He had 620 in his sophomore year.
Yep, not there.
At least his junior year, he did have 1,700 yards. So
yes.
Maybe we can just blame that on Wake Forest.
Well, we have to. That's the thing, is we have to tell that story that he transferred for a reason. He knew he had what it took, and that team was shit. And and then when he got to Michigan State, he was fucking awesome, right? So all of these things are like the story you have to tell, but you do have to tell a story to get there. Kamara, we had to tell a story about him, and it was the right story, but it was also concerning, and it did limit his rookie draft position, if you remember. I mean, I got Kamara in a few spots where I was like, hell, I'll take Kamara here, early second round and stuff like that. It was a lot of fun to draft him there.
Yeah, and another guy whose story definitely needs to be told in this is Tyler Algier. Yes. I mean, obviously, you can't get rushing yards when you're playing linebacker.
No, exactly. And it's the same thing with Javonte. I mean, Javonte did play running back early in his college career, but he was a converted linebacker. So yeah, same type of story. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, in the first season where Tyler Algier actually got in the field, he reached 1,200 total yards. So
Yep.
you can't complain too much. I mean, the story is definitely there. Just looking at other guys in this class, Rashad White is a guy where that's not necessarily there.
No.
Obviously, he gets the story of playing 4 games in his first year at Arizona State.
That's right.
Which,
and in those 4 games, take a look at those 4 games. I mean, he was unbelievable. He gets. I mean, look, he's a JUCO transfer.
570 total yards in 4 games.
Right.
That's like 3 times that for a full season. So would have been like 1,600. So
yeah, and 11.4 a touch, 10 yards a carry. Like, get the hell out of here. The kid was killing it. So, he would have had an unbelievable breakout season in 2020 as a junior JUCO transfer, COVID shortened, and then as a senior was great. 43 receptions, and 6.5 yards a touch, 5.5 yards a carry. He's over 6 yards a carry for his career. 22 touchdowns in 2 seasons. His production profile in his junior and senior season probably tell the story that whatever held him, whatever made him go to JUCO, if that had not happened, he probably would have been successful wherever the hell he would have been.
Yeah, he was successful in JUCO too. I actually have his 2019 stats in front of me.
Please tell me.
1,264 rushing yards on 199 carries, 12 rushing touchdowns, 25 receptions, 216 receiving yards.
Nice. Yep, he did it. Yep.
So, I mean, we got a lot of guys who are, just barely reaching these levels in terms of this, or reaching these levels when we tell the story, but not without the story.
Yeah.
So definitely an interesting class in terms of, that kind of stuff. I always love when we have prospects where we have to tell a story because it's just fun to hear the stories.
Yes. Yeah, I'm really dubious about Isaiah Spiller. I think he's probably a good player, not a great player, is what I think. He went to the combine and dodged. Matt Kelly, again, was on my show today. We talked about how he dodged it. And I'm not I don't like that he didn't want to run the 40. And then he participated in the jumping drills, the broad and the vertical, and he was the worst one there. He's an 8th percentile. Yeah, he's awful. So, I mean, look, he's not bursty. And look, the Noah Hills research said that he just wasn't as good as the other backs in his backfield. He did not get the 6 yards a carry, even though his teammates got there. So it's like you can't tell a story. Yeah, but the offense allowed some other motherfucker to get there. And if you're going to say, well, that other guy's really great, well then, so then he isn't really good.
I'll draft that other guy next year.
Yeah, tell me about the other guy then. What the fuck? So, yeah, there's so much there that, like, the excuse making that has to happen for this Isaiah Spiller situation. I'm not saying he's a bad football player. I'm not saying that at all. Not even a little bit. I'm just saying when we start to say, is he an elite top of the first round type of rookie pick? I don't see that so far in any of the real data. Now, he does have the pass catching. He will get presumably draft capital. And he did have early college dominance insofar as he had, I think 1,000 yards of total yards each season, freshman, sophomore, junior.
1,100.
But I don't think he ever saw over 5.5 yards a carry. Maybe he did. I don't know. You got his stats up. He certainly never saw over 6.
I don't have season yards per carry, but his career yards per carry was 5.6.
Yeah, I think it was like 5.6, 5.6, 5.6 too. I'm going to pull it up real quick because I had it right here. But yeah, he just was sort of, I had my pod early. Yeah, he's 5'4", 5'5", 5'6". So average 5.5 his whole career. He his total touchdowns went from 10 to 9 to 7. His yards per carry never went up. His receptions kind of stayed flat. He never had more than 10 yards a catch. Like, I don't know, man. He's just sort of, I don't know. I just think he's probably just an average type of running back, and that's what we're seeing. And, he's an average running back on a good team, and he'll have his utility in the NFL. I just don't think he'll ever be elite. And I think if you use an elite pick and expect elite performance, you're just not going to get it.
Yeah, and from his sophomore season to his junior season, he actually saw less like targets and attempts. So the coaching staff just either didn't trust him as much as they did before, or they trusted other guys more.
Bingo.
And I mean, they even played 2 more games in his junior season than they did in his sophomore season, and he had less overall touches.
Yep. That's a
Those are
concern.
those weird kind of things that just don't make sense. If you're talking about elite prospects, they should be
That's
getting
right.
better, and they should be getting more work.
Yeah. And, I had asked, he was pretty much thoroughly outproduced by Devin A-Chain. I think that's how you say his name. I mean, 5.6 yards per carry to 7. That's a pretty big difference. 6 touchdowns to 9. And then catching the football, 7.6 yards a catch to 10.9. I mean, just absolutely outplayed by Devin A-Chain. And that's a problem. I mean, if he's really an elite level player, which the burst score so far is the number one thing that's come out from his athleticism testing, is not showing that. So again, I'm very, very dubious of Isaiah Spiller. I'd love to be in. I'm not seeing anything that makes me say, oh, there it is, I'm in. Other than film guys saying he looks good on film. All right, well, that's not enough for me.
Yeah. And burst score, obviously the next thing actually in your anatomy series. So 119 burst score would be 50th percentile. 125 would be 80th percentile, just to put these numbers in some context. There's only one running back sub 117, 2 running backs sub 120. And then you get 6 between 120 and 125, and 5 above that 80th percentile mark of 125.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, most of these guys are, certainly above 50th percentile. And so when you talk about Spiller being at 7th percentile, it's like, well, fuck me, man. That's not good.
Yeah.
So, you know what I'm saying? It's like, oh, he didn't just miss it. It's like, he's fine. He's good, And again, if everything else around it is great, it's like, it's kind of like the Dalvin Cook thing. Dalvin was so good, and he had low burst and low agility score, but it's like everything else was so good with Dalvin. And maybe this is a Dalvin Cook situation with Isaiah Spiller, but Dalvin was so much more. I mean, he had 6.8 per carry. His target share was great. I mean, he was so dominant in college. I mean, so to me, it's not, I don't see Dalvin Cook, I just don't see it. I mean, Dalvin had 20 touchdowns rushing 2 years straight. He had over 1,600 rushing yards 2 years straight. He was just unbelievable. He had almost 500 receiving yards 1 year. This kid was showing big playability in the stat box as well as on film. And so I just don't see it. Yeah, he was low burst, low agility score, 13th and 12th percentile. But, again, I don't see the same player.
Yeah, and I was looking at your tweets for the anatomy series, and the note you had underneath is Dalvin Cook probably just had a bad day.
I mean, probably, right? I mean, probably, he probably did. I don't know. Or maybe he didn't train for the agility one. I don't know. I mean, you watch him, he is a very swift mover. When you watch him break big runs, and then like I said, his 6.8 career yards per carry shows that, whereas with Spiller, it's the reverse. It's like, wait, why is his yards per carry so low compared to his teammates? Well, because, we never said that about, why was he out touched? Why did his touches go down? Why, we never said that with Dalvin. It's like, wait, Dalvin's dope. You know what I mean? He's like unbelievable how dope he is, so it's a big difference for me because of those situations. Now, I will be the first to tell you, even though Dalvin was my RB1 in that class, and obviously I guess I should have had CMC, but I was a big Dalvin fan. I'm not going to tell you that these things didn't scare me then. They did. I was like, whoa, that's pretty ugly. The burst score and the agility score, but I just felt like there was enough around him especially the speed score, the early college dominance, etc. So yeah, that's where it fills in the blanks for me.
Absolutely. Just to quickly hit on some other guys in this class burst scores. Brees Hall, 94th percentile at 131.
There we go.
Absolutely, absolutely nailed it. Kenneth Walker just above the 50th percentile, actually 51st percentile at 118.
Yeah.
Kyron Williams, obviously, he messed up everything at the combine, so he was a 21st percentile burst score. Tyler Algier, 37th percentile. Zamir White, 64th percentile, so good enough for him. And then Rashad White, 87th percentile.
Yes.
So,
Yep.
I mean, Brees Hall and Rashad White are definitely the two guys who, to me, like made the most money at the combine. Because
Yes.
those two showed out.
Yes.
And everything, like from the measurements to the drills to the testing.
Yeah, if you tell me that both Isaiah Spiller and Rashad White get day 2 capital, somewhere similar, right around pick 3.01 in the NFL draft, somewhere right in that ballpark, I'm taking Rashad White over Isaiah Spiller without even thinking about it.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that take.
Yeah.
And then up next we have yards per carry. We've talked about this a little bit.
Yeah.
Those players who are below 6 in their career yards per carry, there's only 2 of them in the top 16 right now. 12 were between 6 and 7, and then 2 of them were 7 plus. And then 5.5 yards per carry is what would be 50th percentile. So that's the average NFL back, basically.
When
and Cam Akers, and Cam Akers is the only running back below average who's in the top 16 now.
Yep, that's exactly right. I mean, yeah, most of these guys you're going to see as an above percentile. And again, we had to tell a crazy story about Cam Akers as to why that was, and it does fit. Everything else was there for Cam Akers too, right? He's not an outlier in a lot of these other things, only that one. And that's when you start to say, okay, well, I can make an excuse about one thing. I'm not going to make an excuse about every damn thing, Same thing with Dalvin. It was like, okay, just that one, When you start making excuses for every single thing, that's when you're probably not looking at an elite prospect. And certainly with Brees Hall, we now know we have a truly elite prospect, and that's exciting stuff, man.
Absolutely. So those are the anatomy of the top 16 running back. I mean, we've gone through them all now. So let's just finish this out real quick with your rankings, how you see these guys, kind of filling out those boxes.
Well, the rankings, and I know you do this too, Kyle, you sort of factor in draft capital into your rankings. And so we're careful not to count it twice. The combine makes the draft capital go up. So we're sort of projecting the draft capital go up for certain guys who did good. So it's not really over counting the combine. It's counting the combine as it affects draft cap. So for me, it's Brees Hall in a tier by himself, and then probably Kenneth Walker in a tier by himself. I'm looking at Brees Hall. No matter what, I want to. No matter what pick I have, I'm thinking, should I draft Brees Hall? So, right away. And then Kenneth Walker, you want to start to really think about whether or not landing spot will matter a little bit. Like, whether or not he can be a 3-down back, whether or not he's going to give you any PPR value, right? Or do I need the out of Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb for him to be successful? So that's the thing you have to think about with Kenneth Walker. And then for me, it's like, I know I just said I hate Isaiah Spiller, and I kind of do, but you have to consider he's going to have draft capital. He did have college production. The film guys love him. So just because I don't love the profile doesn't mean that he won't get opportunity to carry the ball at the NFL level. If he's getting carries, then I like him as a fantasy player. He also did catch the football, but I do have Rashad White and Isaiah Spiller in that next tier by themselves. and then kind of everybody else, because none of these other guys hit all these boxes or check all these boxes. And therefore, you can't just vault them up because you like a guy. Now, the NFL will tell us who they like and don't like. And after the draft is when I'll sort of parse out the rest of these guys. But I like Tyler Algier. I didn't think I would like Zamir White. He's now right there. You and I talked a little bit about Kevin Harris. He's a guy that if he runs fast, he did have explosion. He had the burst. Didn't he have an 86 percentile burst, Kyle?
89.
89. So he's got burst. He did catch passes at the college level. He did have some early success as a sophomore, right? Yeah. So he had some of these things. Not great on anything, but hey, if he's an athlete and we can find a way to get him some draft cap, he might be there. So there's all these guys. Brian Robinson, he's got the A on the helmet. He'll probably get some draft capital. And if he can, I think I said it pre-show, not during the show. If he lands in Atlanta in round 3, you're like, well, shit, that's pretty cool. I mean,
even if it's round 4 and he's the first back they draft.
Right. It's like, oh, shit, that might be good. So I'm not overdrafting any of these guys, but, opportunity leads to fantasy points at the running back position. And some of these guys are good enough where their opportunity can get them to be a valuable fantasy asset going forward. But do remember this. Just if you ever want a good exercise, Kyle, you or the people, just go back into draft classes and just look at the names of the running backs taken in 16 and just look at all the losers that are in there. You'll be like, someone thought those guys were good too. Just like you think, all these guys are good. Most of them are going to be dog shit. Fade everybody. It's the easiest way to be right. So most of these guys are going to suck. Most of these guys are going to be worthless. And that's just the way it goes. Every year there's that. So don't overweight these guys, but you are looking to take shots on running backs later in rookie drafts because of Khalil Herbert and stuff like that, right? James Robinson, Elijah Mitchell. But you do want to find them that have the utility to be a 3-down back. You don't want to draft a guy who's never going to actually do anything, even if the running back ahead of him gets hurt. So yeah, that's what I think I'm at is Breece in tier 1, Kenneth Walker in tier 2, Rashad White and Isaiah Spiller in this sort of tier 3, and then probably everybody else led by guys like Zamir White and Tyler Algier.
Yeah, and you said 2016, so I just pulled it up real quick. Zeke Elliott was the 101. Derrick Henry was the 106 and the second running back off the board. And then in terms of running backs, you had Kenneth Dixon going at the 107.
Everybody loved Kenneth Dixon.
CJ Prosise going at 111.
There you go.
David Johnson at 112, which worked out. Devontae Booker at 201 and Paul Perkins at 202.
There you go. That's a 202. We're not even talking about Tyler Beatty and all these, it's just a lot of misses, some of these, and Perkins had a moment and this and that, and Prosise was hurt and probably could have been something. I mean, there's always an excuse as to why these guys don't succeed, but you go back and look at those profiles and put them on the anatomy spectrum and you're like, yeah, they probably sucked the whole time. You know what I mean? They probably just weren't qualified to be an elite running back in the NFL. And that's just the way it goes. So, Breece Hall or bust, baby.
Breece Hall or bust. Thanks for joining me today. Thanks for chopping it up and getting these rookie running backs. Obviously, we didn't have much of a script because I've been super busy. So I love it. I love having you on because you just talk.
Yeah. Sorry. Thanks, man. You're awesome. I love the show. And tell Tommy analytics wins every time.
Absolutely. Tell the good people where they can find you.
Find me on the undroppables.com, baby. That's where everything's happening. And, when you go search for podcasts, just put the Undroppables. Whatever you're searching, wherever you're searching, just put the Undroppables. You'll find us. But you can find me on Twitter at Dino Game Theory. Hopefully you're already following all of us. Just, search the Undroppables and follow all those motherfuckers too. So we're all there. And we do a lot of great work. There's so many people doing so many cool things. We're adding people to the team. I mean, the people know this, and it's a great group of people to follow. We've got Abe coming in doing DFS and all sorts of fun stuff. So, just follow the Undroppables
and the Undrafted. I mean, there was a great show on there like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, We did have Kyle on. Kyle was great on the Undrafted. Yeah, that's my podcast. I mean, the one thing I do that is really the thing I do every single week is the Undrafted podcast, and it's a lot of fun. I actually let the guests talk, unlike this one where I just do all the talking, which is why I come on this show or any other show. Whenever I guest, I just get my takes out, because when I'm on my show, I really let my guests try and get their takes out and hear what they have to say. But when I'm on your show, I can take over.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys for watching. Thank you for listening. If you're on the podcast feed, we'll see you next week.